Hey everybody, Rabia Sutton here, and this is another episode of Getting From 8 to 9. And my guest today is Matt Higgins, who I'm super stoked to talk to. Matt, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm excited to be here. By the way, I love this topic because it's a topic I obsessively think about every single day of my life. I am the founder of RC Ventures. We're a bit of a hybrid. We invest or build or incubate companies. We've done all three in sports and entertainment, media and marketing, lifestyle, broadly defined, and technology. So our companies range from the largest privately owned soccer tournament in the world that we built from scratch for the last 7 years to partnership in Momofuku with David Chang that we're helping him scale. Okay. So we're a little bit all over the map. It's a private company, so I have a ton of freedom to go in whatever direction makes sense.
Okay, perfect. So,
and I'm a shark on Shark Tank.
Yes, we.
Yeah, I have to plug that early and often. Yes.
Return this.
I don't know. I'm still waiting. You know, it's a little bit like the Academy Awards. You went to find out if you've been nominated. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm waiting.
Well, we are hopeful.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I am hopeful too because I love that show.
Me too.
And my son won't talk to me anymore if I don't get back on.
All right, let's go there.
Okay.
How many kids?
I have 4 kids.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a lot of kids ranging in age from 11 to 18.
Okay.
They're great. They're phenomenal. Big part of my life is scaling and managing to make sure that you always stayed anchored by your children, which I find is a topic that people don't talk a ton about, but that's probably the biggest professional and personal challenge that I have. Let's talk about it. Yeah.
So I have 3.
Oh, good. Ages?
26-year-old daughter.
Not possible.
If you ask me later, I'll tell you.
Okay.
Just turned 17-year-old son, and a about to be 16-year-old daughter.
Amazing.
So
you're in it.
I am in it.
Yeah.
I tell people we're in the home.
Are you stressed about it being almost over? Or?
No, I'm so excited.
They say it's never over.
It's never over.
I hope that's true because I'm getting anxious about it, and even though I still got a few more years, it's just I'm anxious about that.
They will come back.
That's what I'm told. Also, if you convene them with like vacations, I see that as the trend. If you throw really nice vacations, they'll take advantage of it.
Right.
Because I'll get them to come back any way I can. So I don't, as long as I know there's a path.
I also feel like I can't wait to see what they're gonna do.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
And it will be cool to hang out with them where I'm not like worried about their safety because they're older.
Is that ever the case? Then you're worried about their spouse. Then you're worried about their job, their mortgage. I don't know.
No.
I just want to make sure. I always say this. I always work backwards from my epitaph.
Yes.
And so I want to make sure it all plays out because the amount of regret you would feel is if you didn't put your energy into the right place. You can never overcome it. They make songs about it, right? Cats in the Cradle.
Do you want them to come work with you?
No. I truly want to remain agnostic as to what they do, except that they realize and achieve their own dreams, right? Sure. And it sounds cliche, but I think that is the right role of a parent, is to guide and provide insight on all options, but then to stay out of the way. So I want them to be actualized and happy and maybe be a little clingy. I always tell my son I'm going to live on the same block as him. And I really am. I'm a little bit of a helicopter parent to the extent to which somebody could be in my position because I'm traveling all over, but I'm always flying right back.
Do you care if they go to college?
No.
Okay.
I think it's a smart choice to go to college as a hedge, but not really. If they had a compelling vision as to why it didn't make sense for them, I would be on board. I'd come with an opinion. Hey, it's probably a good hedge to go to college.
Yeah.
So you don't have to explain why you didn't. And in terms of optionality, but if you want to go to Apex Technical School, or that was commercials I would see as a kid in Queens. We can't make the first step. You have to call us. No, I think. It's especially with the world evolving, so to have such preconceived notions about what it takes to get there to me doesn't make sense. I just want them to feel good and feel realized in whatever their ambitions are.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get into the scale conversation. So I put the show together because I am interested in how companies have scaled, how people like you who have done it multiple times, and so if there are any kind of experiences that have stood out, or since you said you think about it daily, what are your thoughts today versus the first time you did it?
Yeah. So I have a bunch of thoughts.
Yeah.
Maybe we can organize them into categories, but I think first and foremost, call it a growth mindset, call it a bias towards scale. If you want to go from point A to point B and build a big company, it starts with you personally and professionally. So a question I ask myself every day is, what is the highest and best use of my time today? And I ask myself every day because the answer to that question is a result of everything that came before. It changes every single day. My life has changed since I went on Shark Tank. It's changed since I built this portfolio with Steve and my team at RSC. So what I'm doing today has nothing to do with what I would have been doing 6 years ago.
Right.
And that makes sense. So for example, incubations, they're fun, they're entertaining. You think you're going to have a massive score at the end of it, but it takes a lot of hard work. Like we worked with the team at Resi to build Resi from day one, from a PowerPoint. And they just got sold to Amex, which is amazing. People only see the exit though, and Ben Leventhal, the founder, did an amazing job, but they don't see the pain that he went through to get there. So my point of that is, I'm most likely not doing incubations anymore, because that's not a good use of the learnings and the time and the portfolio that we've put together. Sure. A better use is to help companies that are at an inflection point go to the next level. So that's just one example, but I think every day I start, what's the highest and best use of my time and energy and focus? Mm-hmm. That creates the filter. Sure. The second thing that I work on, flexing the muscle of saying no. How do you say no politely and creatively and non-passively over and over again? Because I think what separates people I've seen who are successful versus those who aren't is so often their capacity to say no. People are just so uncomfortable managing their own time. Correct. And they end up spending their life drowning in defense. And what do I mean by defense? Answering emails all day long, figuring out how to take courtesy meetings all day long. It's almost like they lose their sense of self. And without simply saying, look, I respect your time. I would love it if I had the time to meet with you. But the reality is I'm so focused on achieving what matters to me. My entire heart and soul has gone into this company or this project. I unfortunately just don't have the time. And then saying no. And instead, people just don't go through that. So, I know we're covering all the top. I'm trying to unpack it.
I appreciate it.
I love this topic. So,
the founders that you're working with, is that something you see as a common theme, that when you start working with them, that's an issue that you're helping them develop?
It's actually less starting. It's more in the middle of the game, I would say, because when you're starting, there is almost no meeting that is a bad meeting, right? Like you're just trying to create momentum and almost create a feedback loop. Like, it's a great idea. It's a great idea. Thank you. And help me get to this person or that person. So there's a frenetic energy that you need to get going. And you also want to consult a lot of optimistic people in the beginning, because if you can consult the negative people, they might kill your dream early. So I think it's in the middle. When you're saying, all right, well, again, cliche, what got you here is not what's going to get you there. In the middle is when you have to stop and say, okay, the chessboard is a lot clearer than it was when you first started this thing. Now you can make some choices. What are the top 3 things that I need to do that are more important than anything else, that if I only did those things, I am likely to scale this company or achieve? A lot of people instinctively don't go through that process. They continue the frenetic energy, or what I call the illusion of progress, creating a lot of heat. So I find it's something that almost all founders, or most founders, face in the middle of the game.
Yeah, I'm kind of going through that now, where I have, we've been in business for 8.5 years. I hired the first person full-time in the back office in November, and I've hired 4 more people since then. Right. And it's the point where I'm like, stop copying me on emails. I don't want to go to that meeting. You guys handle it. What I find is a lot of people, so like out of the 5 people, they're used to this corporate micromanagement kind of mentality. And so when I'm like, no, go forth and conquer, come to me if there's an issue, they're very uncomfortable making decisions. And I'm like, I'm not going to make a decision about the process that you're running when you're the one performing it. Why do you want to know how I'm going to do it? Do it the way you and the rest of the team it makes sense to you. And it's amazing to me they don't get that. It's going to take some time to de-brainwash them, but
right. No, it's true. Yes. And also making sure people always understand the why. Like, I'm trying to get us to another place. Right. And so I can't scale if you actually don't take on some more of the decision making and automate it for me. The whole empire will topple over.
I'm going to show them this video.
Right. And I have made that mistake before, recognizing that people are much more effective when they understand the why. So you might say, from where you're sitting on top of the mountain, like, you don't really need to know. Like, just do as I say. And then you realize, I don't perform well when I don't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And neither would anybody who's working for me or around me. So I try to take a beat And I'm not always great at that because there's a freneticism about me. I like to be creative. I don't like too much process. So,
Sure.
But the reality is people will perform much better. And I think the transition from these inflection points of, okay, now I'm scaling, so I don't want to be involved in that. It's not because I disrespect you or I don't believe what you're doing is important. It's because I'm trying to get to another level. People have a hard time kind of breaking through that. Those are friction points. But if you don't take the time, they'll never understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. No, my husband makes me have meetings because I'm like, why? It doesn't
mean
matter.
With you?
Yeah, with the whole team. Like you have to tell them what the vision is. You have to tell them why. Where you
but
going
every leader Like if a leader isn't falling slightly short at that, then I think their priorities are probably in the wrong place too, right? Like you should always be slightly falling short because it means you have a bias towards action as opposed to deliberation, right? Analysis paralysis is also a real thing. So communicate the why so people can be brought along, but not spend all your time, and not spend all your time just thinking and commiserating. So, but if you're falling slightly short, that's okay. But tell your husband I agree. Communication is not an afterthought. It can often be the main event.
Absolutely.
All right. So here's another topic I've been obsessed about lately. This is a debate I have. I posted something on Instagram about how basically habits are everything at the end of the day. Like dream or goal is just a word for the destination, but that to get there, there's a series of habits that brought you forth. Sure. Now, that engendered some anger among a lot of people, some of whom know me and say, this is complete bullshit. At the end of the day, the habits extinguish creativity, and the greatest things that are born of life are born out of habits, right? Yeah. So I was making a nuanced point. And my nuanced point, I feel really passionate about this, is that there are aspects of life of success that are much more likely to materialize if they are born of habituated behavior. So what do I mean by that? In order for me to finally lose this weight that I've been carrying around for 30-something years, that if I implemented a series of successful habits, I'm much more likely to achieve it than if I remained open-minded every time I approached a meal, right? If I didn't have a fixed set of rules and be like, you know what, I could eat a gyro, which is what I do, or a street meat at 12 o'clock in Manhattan, that if I had a series of rules and habits, I'm much more likely to achieve the result. If I'm trying to shake up a whole industry and be disruptive or go on Shark Tank, habits are not going to get me there. Habits are not going to enable me to become part of that institution or do well on it, right? So you almost have to operate in two universes. Yes. Habituate behavior that makes it more likely to achieve a certain goal or dream or result, and in all others areas of your life, resist consistency. Yes. Resist repetition for the sake of it. Because the problem is, in that domain where you need creativity, consistency brings like soothing and comfort, but doesn't actually bring you any closer. So even with your team, it's important to distinguish the two, because people say, well, why can't we do the same thing, or why can't we be consistent in this area? Be like, no, because in this area, we need to use the other side of our brain. We need to roam, and we need to break shit up, and we need to do what we want.
With accounting, we need to be
exactly. With the finance function, there better be some habits. With your goddamn expense report, better be it on time, right? With your Amex, but otherwise, when we're trying to build a company, the naysayers should leave the room, right? Like that. So even in my personal life, I've been thinking about this more and more. What are the areas that lend themselves to success by implementing habits? Let me do that there. And so I'll give you an example of a habit that I've been obsessed about, that I just only recently started, which is the phone and Instagram releases a dopamine hit. And I don't care anybody says that they're immune to it. It's nonsense. It's like saying that advertising doesn't make you buy shit. Like everybody responds to the dopamine hit of your phone, right?
I only buy stuff on Instagram, so.
Okay, so you get my point. Yes. It releases something in your mind.
Yes.
And so we can either resist that or we can use it in our favor. So I am trying to always stay in shape, lose weight, get to where I want to get to, work out, be healthy, live forever. So I won't allow myself to turn my phone on until I have gotten up and gone to the gym every single day. So now I have to get to work, whether it's 5 a.m. or 5:30 or 6, like there's a form of stress. Plus I want to turn the phone on and play around on a post and say what's going on. So that habit single-handedly is more important than any other habit in terms of helping me achieve my fitness goals, because now it's like dangling for me out there. So I think sometimes instituting the habit that will get you closer, but also taking a negative and turning it into a positive, creating that reinforcement loop in your brain is really important. But when I posted the other day on Instagram, I was fascinated by how many people were just irritated by that thought. Other people were behind it, but a lot of the creative types are like, you sold out. And it was, anyway, nuanced point, but a very important one.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. And it's like we were talking about kind of in the kitchen earlier. Yep. Entrepreneur types, creative types have a million ideas a day.
Yep.
You can't focus on all of them. And the more you continue to do that, the less likely you are to succeed at any one of them.
Well, and also the studies show decision fatigue is a real phenomenon, right? You have a limited capacity to make decisions. So habits enable you to automate things where you shouldn't be having a decision.
Right.
Fighting a battle with the gyro versus the salmon is not one I'm going to win over time. And also is taking away burning carbohydrates in my brain that I could be using towards building my company.
Right.
So I'm done with my preaching sermon on this.
One last question about the personal. Are you the type who doesn't like to make decisions at home because you get decision fatigue throughout the day?
That's a great question. I love that question. Well, fortunately, my partner is a Jedi of the highest order.
Yes.
I don't know what that would be called, but
mine too.
Yeah, my partner Sarah is the key to the entire scaling operation, and our marriage is about many things, but it is about our joy of scaling and productivity.
Yeah.
And so fortunately, she does relieve a lot of the decision making, and I'm honest about it, right? Like she knows I don't like committing to schedule because I don't want to miss an opportunity to see my kids. So it stresses me out when I make a commitment. It stresses me out to commit to things that I cannot cancel, like a speaking obligation at night, because I don't want to have had an opportunity to see my kids. So the decision fatigue definitely plays out on the personal front, but I have somebody who's by my side who could help bring up the rear and make sure the whole world doesn't fall apart. Yeah. So that's really important. Again, choosing your life partner, forget it. That's a whole another separate podcast.
100%.
But how important that is to being successful, right?
And my husband is definitely the better parent. I tell everybody.
Really? What's his name? Shout out to the husband. Hi, Jason. Congratulations. You're doing a good thing.
Just like this.
I don't know if it's just because we're on camera, but you're getting a lot of good props.
Everybody knows.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an educator by trade, so that helps too. But he's just very much like this with them, and they know, like, did you clean your room? He's going to be like, 5 minutes inspection. I'm like, did you clean your room? I know they didn't, but I'm like, did you? They're like, yes. I'm like, get in the car, let's go, because I don't have time to micromanage that.
That's awesome. Well, good. No, my wife, Sarah, is so good at so many things. For a while, I thought she was an undercover federal agent, because I was like, nobody could be this talented. She's a licensed contractor. So she wields chainsaws, and she's just incredibly smart. So I'm flanked. My wife Sarah's amazing. My ex-wife does an amazing job with the kids. We share custody.
Okay.
It's a seamless operation.
Yeah.
So without all that support and love, and none of this would happen.
Absolutely.
So.
All right.
Very hard to get right, though. That's a whole separate podcast, which we could break down. Might even just be more important than a scaling podcast. But continue.
All right, let's go real quick into, I really want to know one of the two things I want to kind of get out, and I think they're similarly adjusted, is your introduction to Steve and how he chose you chose him, mutually, whatever, to go into business together. And then similarly, you with Gary.
Right. Well, these are good questions. So Steve is one of these figures that is transformative, but has been below the radar for a long time, right? Everyone knows the largest developer in the United States, one of, but he's 79 years old, perpetually intellectually, doesn't look at incredible shape. No, incredible shape.
Yeah.
Works out every day, by the way. I always say Steve is my longitudinal study about how to live a great life, right? Okay. So I can just mimic his behaviors, but works out every single day. But his mind is always curious. He's not a storyteller, so he doesn't spend any time looking backwards. He's always looking forward, which I find in a lot of successful people. Like, you want to reflect for a minute and take joy, but you want to just keep moving on. So he had bought the Miami Dolphins and was still early in his ownership. And he was looking for somebody who was like-minded, who could understand that we want to build a great team and a lasting winning culture, but we also want to build sort of an ecosystem around it, right? That being in a sports team unlocks so many great opportunities to cultivate new technology and be innovative and be experimental. And Steve had that mindset. And we had met each other through the NFL when I was working at the New York Jets. And we just developed a relationship over time. And I had decided to leave. I had a couple of ideas that I was pursuing, creating a couple of companies that had been percolating in my brain for so long that finally I was like, I can't take it. I have to go start this. I've been at the Jets for 8 years. Okay. And I left. And Steve met me through that process after I had left the Jets. And we just started comparing notes. And I told him about my vision. Gary was one of the people on the list. Yeah. That Gary was very early in his career. And we formed this partnership, and it was very loosely defined. I would help oversee the business of the Dolphins and, get that straight. And we recruited an amazing CEO named Tom Garfinkel, and has done a phenomenal job. But also I had these ideas that I wanted to start building a portfolio in sports and entertainment, and then moving on from there to media and marketing. And, told him about Gary, and here we are 7 years later, and I think we've done a pretty good job.
Okay.
With Gary, is an amazing story. I was at the Jets. It was 2009, the beginning of Twitter and whatnot, and everything kind of really taking hold. And my guys on my sales team, actually Jeff Fernandez, I remember his name, was telling me there's this crazy Jets fan. Like, he's insane, and he loves wine, and he's going to be big. Right. Certainly has enough money to buy a suite. Will you go meet him and try to help me close a suite? So I was like, it was part of the job, less glamorous parts of the job. And I trekked out to Springfield, New Jersey, and I met Gary at a bagel store. I love telling this story. And I sit down with him, and Gary is the same Gary, only without the credentials. So imagine if you met Gary walking down the street, you might be a little taken aback. So hands are gesticulating, and Matt, the internet's gonna be huge, and whatever. And he's making all these predictions. So the first 10 minutes, I was like, what is going on? But in the second 10 minutes, as you spend any time listening to Gary, what you hear is wisdom and truth, right? Packaged differently than maybe you're used to. But these predictions, right? For example, social media is going to enable every single person to become a content machine. And the big corporations are going to be unable to keep up. They won't be nimble enough. And they will begin to compete with the masses who will be able to reach everyone one-to-one. So corporate behavior will begin to mirror that. You'll be able to need to know how to have a dialogue with every one of your customers one-to-one. What's that look? This is 2009.
Yeah.
So all these different things. So at the end of this spiel, so me and my brother AJ, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start a firm. He's in college now, but when he graduates, we're going to create a firm to help these companies figure this out. And at some point in this 1 hour conversation, we came up with an idea that why don't we run an experiment and take a player on the team and see if we could build their social following in a way that wouldn't happen organically. And through that experiment, the Jets and myself have become the first client of this new thing called VaynerMedia. Right. And I remember I got him on the cheap, by the way. You can't even get Gary to show up for an ungodly amount of money. So I'm very proud of this, Gary. So for 4 Jets tickets, we became the first client of VaynerMedia.
Who was that personality?
It was Kerry Rhodes, the safety. Mr. Hollywood, I believe he's called now. Yeah, so Gary did all, and Gary's so passionate. I mean, everything about, what I love about Gary, everything you see about Gary externally is the same as you see about who Gary really is, except for maybe the nuance, even a more complete picture. Sure. I think the part that isn't noticed is what a great business person Gary is, and what a great job he's done building Vayner. But anyway, to finish the story, I partnered up with Steve, and we were going through different ideas, and I told him I wanted him to meet, Gary, right? And I was wondering how that would go. And this is what's amazing about Steve. Yeah. Within 30 seconds, he understood. He knew. He knew faster than I knew at the bagel store. And we started working on the idea of partnering up in VaynerMedia. Spent a year to paper the deal, and we became a significant minority owner and Gary's partner now it's probably 5 years ago. So I always like to say one of the best deals I ever did, but he's become family to me. Yeah. And we've helped build the firm into what it is today, which is a very large firm. I don't think people have a sense. They see Gary on Instagram.
No, I've been there.
Yeah. 1,000 people doing great creative work. So I'm really proud of that. And in the early days of RSC, we did a bunch of deals like that. Jesse Darris is my partner. Okay. He's one of the best of communications / branding / PR firms that really delve into the direct-to-consumer space. So we're behind launches of some of the best brands out there. And Jesse's brilliant. And again, he was a client. I was a client, and I got to meet him. So I think I've developed over time a decent eye for emerging talent, and I like to think I supply whatever the missing piece is to go the rest of the way, or a missing piece, not the missing piece.
What's the common denominator there? Is it energy? Is it? Because I know there's also the debate about, is it the CEO?
Yeah, it's always the CEO.
Is it the founder versus whatever?
It's always the founder. Okay. The idea, I know people say ideas are cheap. I mean, there's a reason cliches exist, right? Like, they tend to be true. It's about the jockey. True. Yeah, ideas are cheap. Very true. Yeah. No, they're you can make a lot of money just listening to cliches. It's kind of like what Warren Buffett says. People say, well, why won't they make money the way you make money? It's like, most people don't have the patience to get rich, right? Like, and do what Warren Buffett did. So, but cliches, are true. And the hardest lessons I've had to learn is when I think that the power of an idea will eclipse the weakness of a founder. Yeah. It's never, ever true. Okay. And so I think the common denominator is everybody's missing something. Nobody has the full complement of skills to go the entire distance, but the number one skill you do have to have is the self-awareness and humility to recognize it, right? So I don't have the full complement of skills to go the rest of the way. Without my wife, I'm not sitting on Shark Tank. I really don't. So she's probably the single most important person that completed the skill set, right? Every founder has something that they need, and I take joy in finding out that there's somebody else has something that I don't possess, because it lets me know there's more to discover in this universe. And I marvel at it, like the greatness of other people, and then I get to kind of play a little bit of a supporting role.
Right.
So that is fun for me. And two, the feeling of just making a slight difference in the trajectory. Like it's almost, I always look like a space shuttle trying to get out of achieve escape velocity and get out of the orbit, and knowing that it's not quite on the right trajectory. If I just can make it adjust, I help send it off to outer space, mixing my metaphors at the same time. But I love doing that. So everybody's got something. So the common denominator of those who fail are those who don't have the humility and the confidence, because they go together, to accept that shortcoming. It's not even the right word for it, but that missing element, and then seek it out. That to me has been the number one thing I found in those who don't make it. Like, oh, you don't have the humility, and you're not confident enough to know that it doesn't make you less person because you don't have everything it takes. It makes you a greater person to accept it and recognize it, because nobody does.
Do you like managing people?
I do. I like managing people no more than necessary to achieve the result. Like, you're not going to find me running Verizon one day, or that's not the best use of my skill. I'm more like influencing people to help them accept something that they need to accept to go the rest of the way. I enjoy that. I enjoy
the mentorship.
Or just even I think of it. It's funny. I don't even think as mentoring. I think as submitting to the greatness of their mission, and then giving them the straight talk about, okay, but this is the one thing.
Coach.
Yeah, I guess it is a coach. I don't like the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Right. I'd rather just like, okay, there's something missing, and we're gonna go there. And then watching it unlocked and then turning back. It's amazing. Like, look at Resi, and like that's crazy. That thing doesn't exist unless we all sort of roll up our sleeves, and look what it's done. And now it's at Amex.
How much of their acquisition of what the other company that they just...
Which one? Prior to
that they acquired.
Oh, you mean Reserve?
Yeah.
You mean Resi acquiring Reserve, and then Amex acquiring...
I was just gonna say, how much of Amex buying Resi
what had to do with that?
Yeah.
No, I don't think that. I think that was just, there was a consolidation underway in the space, and I think Resi makes sense for Amex for a ton of reasons, right? Like, this generation's not doing concierge for benefits. No. Resi did a phenomenal job in Ben Leventhal of getting the best restaurants on the platform. And look, those spaces where you have an incumbent that's been around in the early days of technology and that really hasn't been forced to innovate, those are incredible spaces, right? Because they're ripe for innovation, but the incumbent position is intimidating. Like in the early days of Resi, everyone thought, that's really hard to take on Open Table. It's really hard to attack this space. And you just sort of stick with it. That's the other thing I've learned along the way about scaling.
Yeah.
To persist is to prevail. Like, if you just keep going, ultimately you'll pull it off, and that is very comforting. Doesn't mean you got to keep doing the wrong thing. So if you persist and you don't iterate, right? There's a problem. But if you persist and iterate and evolve, whatever word you want to use for it, you will always win, right? So now your iteration needs to be driven by intellect to a degree, right? Because if you just keep going in the wrong direction and flailing. But I actually even think if you have a bias towards evolving and iterating, you're most likely going to stumble on the right thing through grit, right? And I think a lot of people, but if you're standing still and then persisting, that's just called a waste of time. So I want to caveat that piece of advice.
Exactly. If you're moving forward, eventually you're going to go around in a circle and figure out, hopefully, what you missed the first time.
Yeah, I think most people do. Grit is a real thing, and that is the number one common quality attribute that I see among successful people and wealthy people is almost an irrational grit, and they don't absorb the losses. When the losses come in, they find ways to disclaim them or disavow them, or I'll get them next time. But when the wins come in, they absorb them and they allow it to make them elevate their self-esteem. It's fascinating. Whereas the rest of us are the opposite. We discount the wins.
100%.
We always think but I could have done better, or it's not really me. And the loss is like, oh my God. That is how most of us are wired. If there was one thing I could retrain about my brain and everybody out there who's watching this, is finding out the way to reflect the losses. Like, we're not here on this earth very long anyway.
Yeah.
We all suck in some way, right? Like, absorb the wins, right?
Learn the lessons, move on.
Yeah, and move on, because that's the key. That's what the very successful people that you admire are doing.
Right.
A lot of them are, not the artists maybe, or but a lot of the people that you admire are doing that. Because how else could you possibly survive otherwise? We're all taking so much incoming all the time. So if you're absorbing all that negative energy, you'll succumb.
Yes.
Right.
Then you're depressed.
I'm going on and on, but I enjoy this topic.
It's true. All right. So how does one go about getting a Steve Ross, a Gary Vee, a Matt Higgins to hear their pitch, to mentor them, to...
That's a good idea. Well, I always think it's little tells that signal to me that something here is very interesting. And some of it can just be intuitive. Like, if random emails come in, I always take a look really quickly. I'll scan it. It might be a 30-second scan.
Right.
And then my team will get the forward.
Yeah.
Like, and then try to discern, why is he forwarding this to me? But they're little tells. Like, is it a potentially very large business, right? Mm-hmm. That's number one, because at this point in my evolution, I don't want to work on something that isn't a large business, because...
Meaning it has to be a large business when it comes into... It has to be
potentially large business. It doesn't have to be now. It has to be at the end of the rainbow.
Right.
It has to be a true pot of gold,
yes.
however defined, because one of the cruel parts about life, small projects, small businesses take the exact amount of time as big projects and big businesses, which I like. Steve would tell me about that a bit in the beginning. No, it's like, because of course he's arrived at a different, he's been there, done that. But it took me time to realize that, and it's incredibly true. And if you think even a house renovation, my wife and I have done house renovations together because it's fun, right? And I was amazed by a small renovation for a house that yields much less profit will take almost the same amount of managerial energy as a large renovation, which is logical, but still interesting.
Yes.
And the same true in business. You have the same human problems, you have the same management problems, you have the same attracting capital. They're just a different magnitude, but they're not fundamentally different. No. So you might as well spend your energy on that which is worth the return, because everything takes 3 to 5 years and your time is precious, right? So I'm first evaluating, is this in the end of the day going to get there? Another question I find entrepreneurs don't ask when they're at the gate is, your mind is swimming with all these great ideas, but have you stopped to ask yourself, saying, just because I could do this, should I do this? People hate to answer that, because you know why? They're afraid there won't be another idea around the bend. But ideas are like nice houses. When you lose out on a house when you're bidding, now I'm doing house metaphors, when you lose out on a great house, you always think, I'm never going to get another house. And the reality is, the next one you're like, oh shit, I'm so glad the other one got away.
Right.
You should kill your own ideas if they don't meet the standard of, is this worth my time? Now, something could be worth your time in the evolution of your life, but won't be worth the time of the person you're trying to enlist.
Right.
Another thing. Something that when people are trying to get mentorship or seek my attention, I always say the number one advice make it really easy for me or anybody like me, because they're fighting a battle to survive too. Doesn't matter how.
Give them
okay, so
practical things.
I think you should not ask for more than 3 things, and they should be very discreet pieces of advice, right? That I can answer on the spot. Nobody wants to go on a rescue mission. Nobody wants to sign up to save you, right? It's just human nature, because your desire to be mentored or to ask for advice is competing with that person's need to execute what's on their plate, right? Yeah. What made you admire them in the first place? So ask for 3 things and make it very discreet. It's 3 questions. What do you think I should do here? Make it answerable. And what you'll find is people they enjoy like getting back to you. The problem that people make all the time is they don't package it the right way. And if you start a dialogue, well, then maybe that dialogue will lead to something more. Absolutely. They make it, I'll get this pitch a lot, right? And so will anybody in any position. And you probably get it too. Hey, can I buy you a dinner or a cup of coffee, right?
That's what I was going to say. And eliminate you're going to see them in person.
Exactly, because it's not going to...
phone call.
Because you're not doing that either in your life. Like, it's very hard to do that. But after we formed an intimate relationship, then maybe it's possible. And I always think it's like the worst advice. Instead, say, 3 things. Here's the challenge I'm facing. If you were to do this, and so forth. And the reality is, if you don't have 3 discrete things that you need, you're not ready to actually even ask for the meeting. If you're asking for the meeting and the cup of the coffee, it's because you're looking for somebody to whiteboard. And that's not a good use of somebody who's got something that could help take you the rest of the way.
Yeah.
So that's on like the mentorship advice side. But back to the idea side, I want to make sure that it's scalable and can be a large business and worth my time. And I want to make sure that the person has put in all the work to get there to that email. everything, down to grammatical errors, down to the presentation of it, down to little tells that show me that there aren't these big missing pieces that you're looking for me to fill in, and then it gets my attention. So I know that's not like a formula,
and then
but
being real about like if they did have grammar mistakes, like I'm not the best speller and I didn't have it.
Well, that's fine too, but it's just also common sense. People. It's not so much that you need to be like Einstein or have perfect grammar. It's did you put the time and energy, or are you looking for me to go ahead and put the time and energy, right? Because everyone wants to be efficient with their time, and they don't want to go on a rescue mission unless it's philanthropy. That's different. But you're saying you want me to be a business partner and be excited.
Yes.
Well, then make that thing really tight, right? And then again, if it's simple advice, just make it really easy for me to go ahead and engage. And I love talking to people on Instagram. I do it all the time because it's tender. It's I like connecting.
You want to connect with them in the comments versus DMs.
I want to connect with them in the comments and the DMs.
And the DMs, or
no, in the comments, okay. Right? I don't mind DMs, but then it turns into, well, I've got this idea. I've done nothing for it. I'm also working full time. Right. I have no money, but I think it's going to be huge. It's called the internet, and so that's it's not practical. Of course, it tugs on me.
Yeah.
Like everything tugs on me, right? Yeah. So I'm empathetic, but it's not practical. So, but I will answer a discrete question that if I can kind of help somebody go the rest of the way. But there's a lot of there's also too. There's a lot of advice out there that like pay it forward, and then. I've seen that come up a lot where people say, how can I serve you and what can I do for you? Yeah. It feels a little slightly manipulative, actually. Have you noticed that? It does feel a little bit because it's like being a tactic. The better way would be like, I know you don't have a ton of time. Right. Here's the one question. Could you ask for me in 10 words or less? Like, okay. I'm not, how could I would be wrong for me to say no to that. Everybody has time enough to make for that, right? Like, so that's what I think everyone should ask of the universe. Can you package it in a way that makes it possible for me to answer you and provide something of service to you while still pursuing my priorities? Right. Because we all have an obligation, I think, to the universe to make time to give back, but we also have an obligation to pursue what we're pursuing, right?
Yes. Can we talk about diversity?
Please, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Go for it. Go ahead. What's the question? No, you have to ask a question.
So, all right, I was just at this venture capital meets federal government conference last week in DC, and one of the questions that the VC firms got was from a professor at American University, because that's where it was being held, and the question was, women founders, companies are not being invested in, at the same rate as male-run companies. And so you VC firms that were on the panel, what are you doing about that? Do you think that's true? That kind of thing.
Right. What was the answer to that?
All of them were like, yes, you're correct. They're not. We're all trying to solve it. Yes, it's a problem. Everybody recognizes it's a problem. I think there's more focus on it right now, but the evident solution isn't there.
Right. Well, number one, at least people are finally talking about it now, which is amazing. I find I just don't get the phenomenon. Like in my experience, women founder versus male founder, there is zero difference on the ability to execute, on the quality of the ideas, on anything about it. So we're not a traditional VC in that we're not putting a set amount of money to work. Sure. So we're not like analyzing deal flow across a set. We sort of are opportunistic and do what we're going to do. But just generally, like looking at the industry, I actually don't get it. And everything I've seen working with women founders is the same as working with male founders. And so if you want to make money in this world, which is the object of the exercise, you would back everybody at an basically equal relative rate to the deal flow that you're saying. So I don't get it. I'd like to do more about it. And my contribution to it is being completely receptive to a female founder, diverse founder, and seeking it out. We talk amongst our team, like how do we lean into the problem and figure out who we can.
Because I asked Gary this, and because I was like, well, what do you feel about like quotas? And he was like, I'm from Russia, no, right?
Yeah. I was like, which I get that.
I understand.
But I think it's not so much about quotas; it's about introspection and auditing.
Or just a focus on it, right?
Well, if there's a distortion in the relative deals you have, it's not enough to say, well, I'm not seeing those deals. Then you have to say, well, why might not you be seeing those deals? Is there something about behavior or culture that's making you not see them? So I don't think it's about quotas so much more. It's about introspection and reflection on why do the percentages don't match the demand out there. And then the reality is you do have to put yourself in a position to see those deals. So I was thinking about Serena Williams, right?
Yes.
So she has made a decision that she is going to focus on, women and minority owned VC companies.
Like 80% of what she's
Well, if her deal flow is doing that. So number one, conscious decision. Two, since it's a smaller subset, willing to put the energy in to still find the best deals, because she's doing no one any good if those deals don't work out at a higher rate, right? So she's putting in the time to curate. So it obviously can be done.
Right.
But so I'm with Gary. I don't think it's about quotas per se, but it is about reflection to see where you hold up. And we're an investor. I could tick off things that we've been in, but I don't think that's the point. It's whether or not you're committed to it.
Yeah.
And I came from nothing, and I have raised by a single mother. I took my GED when I was 16 years old. Yeah, and I'm not telling it. I'm telling it for no other reason other than I have a strong sense of righting the wrongs and of the oppressed being unfairly held back.
Yes.
Because I watched, basically how hard it was coming out of poverty for my mother to claw her way out of it. So I feel very strongly about that topic. And so anywhere it shows up, it's like, really, why would somebody not invest in somebody else because they were of color or they were a woman? It's so anathema to me and terrible. So in our world, again, not being a fund and allocating money, any opportunity we can, we would seek it out.
Okay. I love it.
Okay. So I've always loved the show. And a lot of Shark Tank to me, and maybe I idealize it to an extent, but I would watch all the episodes with my son, and it became a platform for us to connect, which I thought was a unique phenomenon.
Your oldest?
My youngest. From we've been watching with for years, and then we watched all the reruns, and we would have this funny banter. It's the way in which he would kind of understood what I did in my day job, and he would be fascinated by Mr. Wonderful's royalty deals, and he would ask me questions like, "Did you do a deal like that?" I'm like, "Nobody does deals like that. It's like TV," and but that's so anchored by a love for the show, and in a sense that it's the epitome of the American dream that anybody can transcend on the one hand, right? So you have a great idea. It's not preposterous that you're going to come from middle America and you're going to put this idea forward, right? However, you can't get there all the way. These millionaires and people will come back and will lean in, but not philanthropy, right? It's not socialism, right? It's we're going to come back in, we're going to help you with the recognition that we're also going to make money along the way, right? So to me, it's the epitome of this American dream coming together. And I, despite everything I went through as a kid in this country and got to see firsthand what happens when you have no health insurance and you have to spend your nights at the ER because that's your primary physician, and eating government cheese and everything that I went through. At the same time, I got my GED, I went to college, and I lived off of Pell Grants and student loans. 7 years at college at night, had 2 jobs, advanced quickly, went to Fordham Law, got my law degree, and was offered a job at Skadden by the time I finished. Nobody held me back from where I came and my circumstances. And so to me, the show epitomizes a lot of those American values. And then I wanted to be on it, which is kind of crazy and far-fetched. And how does one?
Not.
Well, no, apparently not, because I'm here. As I always tell people, I belong here because I am here, right? I did. I pulled it off. No, because everyone has that imposter voice, right? Like,
absolutely.
And it's always at the moment of when you're reaching beyond your boundaries. Always we conjure this enemy in this voice in our heads to say you're an imposter. And you're going to be found out. Like, it's like,
what is yours mainly around the imposter syndrome?
No, that's only when shit's really on the line. No, I think it's about time and productivity. Am I focused on the right thing? Am I drowning, or have I created too much noise around me that I'm not effective? That's probably, I'm not being effective is a big one. The kids constantly. Am I spending enough time? Like, this is the only thing that matters. I know that when I'm standing at the precipice of death, I know my only thought's going to be is, did I do right by them? And the second thought would be like, I didn't travel enough. But the first thought will be like, did I do right by them? And I had cancer. I'm a cancer survivor, and that I know that because I stood not at the precipice, but I stood like in the hallway. I was like, I saw it, and I said, wow, I really know what I'm going to think about on my last day on Earth. But back to Shark Tank. Love the show. What I loved about it, though, is like, how does one get themselves on Shark Tank as a shark? And it was such an improbable reach. And I spent a year talking to the folks at Sony and all the amazing, wonderful people around this institution, and meeting with them, deciding, and they could choose pretty much anybody to go on the show, and then they gave me a shot. So I'd have to say it was probably the biggest professional reach in my life, the biggest step change.
Yeah.
But then to pull it off and compete competently
Yes, I love it.
is amazing. And again, another thing I really passionately believe in is this notion of the reach, that oftentimes we think we need to evolve incrementally, and we hold ourselves back with this incremental progress. Sometimes like you can make a step change. You can just go ahead and say, you know what, I had never been on TV before. This whole thing is preposterous. And, and then the lights come on. But intuitively, I know that this is what I do in my day job. I mentor people, I build companies. And so to just make that jump, I feel really passionate about that. And it's important, and for everyone, every once in a while to do that, right? To just say, I'm not going to just do an evolved version tomorrow of what I did yesterday. Every once in a while, I'm just going to chuck it, and I'm going to do something that's completely out there. And Shark Tank was that for me.
Did you know any of the sharks personally or professionally beforehand?
Well, I didn't, but I made sure I did. I went out, I spent time with Kevin, Mr. Wonderful, and had made contact with some of the others, but I didn't, nor was I on anybody's radar. I was sort of laboring and behind the scenes, doing what I was doing.
Right.
But for me, it's not about TV.
Yeah.
It's not about anything other than the fact that I just love that show, and it's what I do all day long. So it's been incredibly fun.
Does your son get to go on any of the taping?
Well, that's the irony of the whole thing. I do all this work. I think he's going to be like blown away by it. He's not that interested in sports or anything else that I do.
Okay.
But it kind of went over like a big dud. Nobody cared that much. It's like I think everyone was worried that I was going to get to my head, but nothing really gets to my head. So no, but it was great. We held a party together, and the kids are very grounding at the end of the day. Like they care about what they should care about.
Absolutely.
They're not remotely impressed by Shark Tank or anything else. Yeah. So that's good. But but we still watch the episodes together, and and we'll lay on the couch and see what's going on. But it's been fun to be involved in it and to do the deals. Try to work on it, try to, get people to the next level.
Yes, I can see that. Do you want to talk about your philanthropy and Autism Speaks?
So I'm very passionate about autism, and, family members are affected. I know a ton of people who are in the same situation, and I just think that it's one of these situations where a lot of the hard work, a lot of the effort, a lot of the pain takes place behind closed doors, because you have to live your life in such a regimented way when you have a family member on the spectrum that it can become isolating over time. And I think that community involved in autism may not be perfectly positioned to fight the fight. And it's up for others who have the energy or the wherewithal, the resources to fight that fight for them. And what does that entail? That means fighting for family services to make sure, because kids on the spectrum grow up. And, what does that look like over the long term? Yeah. It's fighting for research, because we still don't have any of the answers as to what are the underlying causes of all these different types of conditions, because it truly is a spectrum. It's a spectrum of behavior, but it's also a spectrum of causes. So underlying autism is many, many different genetic causes that we still don't completely understand. So I think, and going back to focus, for me personally, you could be just as spread thin philanthropically as you are professionally.
Yes.
So this is what I've chosen to focus on. I care about autism, and I care about human rights. Those are the two things that really matter to me. I've done a lot more on autism than I have in the other category, but I feel like my life will be devoted to that category in one way or another. But I'm very passionate about that, very passionate about people being disempowered and lacking a voice. And so for me, I think both those causes touch upon those areas.
Yes. So my husband
and single mothers, I care about that. I care a lot about single mothers, because I watched just the heroic effort that goes into being a single parent.
Brother?
Yeah, me and three rotten brothers, for which
3 brothers.
yeah,
so
four of us. Can you imagine how miserable that is as a single mother? But no, my mother was amazing. She had these 4 kids. She never finished high school, and she got divorced. And as an adult, she went and got her GED. That's where I came up with the idea that I could do the same thing.
Right.
But she came and got her GED, went to college, and slowly began climbing her way up. And education was a place that restored her sense of dignity and self-worth. And she just loved it so much, she just never wanted to leave. So she'd invent new degrees to go. I used to make fun of her all the time. I mean, the only thing she didn't get was like a degree in art history. I mean, she got everything close to it. Urban studies, sociology, master's in library studies she started pursuing. She went to college for 12 years, all because it was the one place in life where she had been fighting all these health issues her entire time, never quite got any traction financially, but it's the place that gave her dignity and told her that she was special. So I watched that single parent journey, and I don't think it's just women, it's men too. It just the burden tends to fall more to women, but any single parent out there, and anybody who's gone through the train wreck of divorce understands what that's like. So for me, it's great to go back to Queens College, which I did this year, and to be able to give these scholarships to women who are going along the same, trajectory as my mother. So to me, out of all the things I do, nothing is more rewarding because I know exactly what's going on in that person's life. And what blew me away is before I got to give the commencement address at my mother's college, that I got to meet with recipients of the scholarship I had created in her honor. And it's one thing to be a little bit removed from it. It was almost hard to have conversations because they were dealing with the exact same fact patterns.
Oh yeah, I would have been.
I mean, there were many times where it's like, I'm about to give a commencement address to 10,000 people and I barely can function. Like, because every single person gives me a different story, but I met with these two mothers and they were telling me the exact same struggle that multiple times they thought they'd have to drop out. I got to meet their kids who were about the same age as I was when my mother graduated. And yet they both had this fiery, defiant spirit. And we were commiserating saying, well, now when you get to reap the rewards. Now your pain becomes your powerful story because it's so impressive. Right. When you were laboring through it, it feels impossible. Like, how am I going to take care of these kids? And how am I going to get this degree? But now you're a hero. Now you have the degree. Now everybody admires what you've done. And now you get to reap the rewards. Now people will want to hire you because that you've shown your mettle, right? Whereas during the struggle, it just felt like a burden, right? So that's amazing to me. So out of all the things I do that brings me joy, it's going back to Queens College and sort of talking to kids and just reconnecting with my mother and the journey that she went to. So I'm definitely passionate about that. And again, back to strong women in my life. My wife is the secret weapon. Everybody around here knows it professionally. That Sarah is the.
How long have you guys been married?
We've been married for 2 years. Okay. We've been together for a long time, and we just renewed our vows. Our little thing that we do every year, just to make sure we're still in it. But she's just great. So anyway, I'm lucky. Like, are you with Jason?
Yes.
Right. A lot of shout out to you, Jason, in this podcast. It's good, right? It's not just about it's about the spouse. It's not about it takes a team. I always say this. I want to give a commencement speech about all the things that nobody's telling you that you should hear.
That's
right. Like, and one of the topics I always think is, to some extent, marriage is like a corporation without an org chart. That we romanticize it and we think it needs to be that way, but like nobody sits down and says like who's doing what. And that there's no resentment. What's the partnership look like? Correct. Here's where I'm deficient,
right, and
here's where you might be. Let's both bring up the rear and let's figure out how to make something better than we ever could have made on our own.
Everybody's balance looks different.
Everybody's balance, and then you just like sit down and it's not hierarchical.
And it changes.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's not hierarchical. It's about division of labor in a way that's fair.
Yes.
That enables each party to unlock their full potential, right? And that nobody's exercising dominion over anybody else or basically hampering your dreams. It's about collectively forming it. So there's a bunch of topics that I want to talk about. Child rearing, the first year of having a child. Nobody tells you about that either, right? Because everybody wants you to sign up. Nobody tells you that they don't sleep, that they're wired not to sleep for 3 months. Like, why is that the dirty little secret of...
I have a 17-year-old, so I haven't slept in 18 years.
No, but why doesn't nobody tells you? Because they want everybody to come along too. Like, it'll be amazing. And it mostly is. It's just the early months are very shocking.
Or now when they're old and like coming home at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, I'm like such a light sleeper, so I hear.
Right, there's that other, and the teenage daughter phenomenon. Nobody talks about that phenomenon. That's its own special podcast.
I've been lucky.
Yeah, No, the kids are great. Kids are great. Yeah. But it is funny that there are a lot of topics about shared humanity that should be discussed that we don't discuss. Right. Another one that I get obsessed about is that we spend so much time anxious about where do we go next when this is all over, but we don't really talk about it and relieve ourselves of the pressure of it, right? Sure. And I have an app on my phone. It's my favorite app. It's called Reoccurring. So yeah. So 5 times a day it reminds me I'm going to die.
Oh.
And it gives me a quote about it.
Okay.
And there are people in the world who do this as a meditative practice. Bhutan, I always say the name wrong. They're the happiest people on earth. This is statistically measured. And a big reason why is that they remind themselves of their mortality multiple times a day. And if you actually take a step back and you do it, you realize that so many of the things you worry about day to day cannot hold up against the juxtaposition of the prospect that you will die.
Correct.
Right? And when you bring it forward, you're like relieved, like, oh, right, don't sweat the small stuff.
Yes.
And by the way, if you're faced with your own mortality, the human response is to actually extract more from life. When you're worried about your own mortality, the response is to try to deflect it or mitigate it somehow. But if you accept it, you actually want every day to be great and amazing.
Yes.
So it's one of the things
downloading it today.
Yeah, that's why I can't stand small talk. Is because it's like why can't should we be talking about the fact that we're all going to die? Like, wouldn't that be a better use of this time? And then we could
need you to accept it.
Right, and we could soothe each other,
Yeah.
and then we can go ahead and we can go forth from there. So when I had cancer, when I knew that I wasn't actually going to, there was a 3-day period when I thought I might die. It was pretty serious,
Yeah.
right? I was fascinated by how everything that I spent my time thinking about faded away and could not hold up against the prospect of death. So most of my thoughts were actually hollow. Like, for example, if you may die because you have cancer, you're not looking through the New York Times brownstone listings or imagining what kind of big house you're going to buy. You're not going to think about a nice car anymore. Like, you're only thinking about your kids and did I do right
Your
by this
time,
world,
yeah.
my time, right? So that state that I was in for those few days, I'm actually in today, and so is everyone else,
Yeah.
but we don't realize it.
Yes.
Just because I had data that I might actually die in 6 months from this cancer doesn't mean that I might not actually die in 6 months.
Right.
So we have this perpetual state of the prospect of our own mortality, but we don't spend any time commiserating over it because we're like afraid of it, like as if it's a morbid topic, when it's not a morbid topic. It's actually a topic that gives us freedom to live. So
That's the only guarantee.
So anyway, back to my commencement address. These kids will be like, this is the biggest downer. I could just imagine, like, that's what I get excited in my mind about fantasizing about how this would be the most pan speech, all these terrible topics that nobody's going to talk to you
Let me
about.
bring it back to scale.
Yeah, you're right,
Now,
right.
Your
Yeah.
point is that when you sweat the small stuff, it's hard to keep your vision focused forward.
It
on
is
how
like,
you're gonna scale,
right, again, going
right?
back to
Or
like,
anything else.
what's the most important thing that
Yes.
matters for you to achieve your result? And again, ask that question. Don't be afraid of that question.
Right.
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 Good.
Matt, I appreciate you.
I enjoyed it. I know we went on
So
some
great.
philosophical tangent, but apparently I needed to get it off my chest.
All right, guys, thank you for watching another episode of Getting From 8 to 9.
Yeah.
Hearing all of Matt's wonderful wisdom.
Great to be with you. I love this topic, and most important thing is got to know it is possible to get from 8 to 9. In fact, objects in motion tend to stay in motion, and that is true in businesses too. So if you already got to 8, it's really on you if you don't get to 9.
Okay.
That's it.
I love it.
I'm putting it on you.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.